Easton has learned a hard lesson over the last few months. He knows now that grief is the most powerful emotion a human can feel. To him, loss is a complex mix of anger, joy, and love. Anger is the easiest part to see because it comes from the pure injustice of losing something precious. It is a physical pain, like a deep ache inside that feels as bad as a real injury. He knows that no amount of screaming at the sky can make it stop. Even though everyone knows death is coming, Easton believes no one is ever truly ready for the finality of it. Then there is the joy found in memories. Easton thinks about small moments like a kiss on a beach or a driving lesson in a nice car. These memories help a person keep moving, but they also have a sharp sting. He hopes that one day these thoughts will stop hurting so much. But the biggest part of grief is love. People only hurt because they loved someone so deeply. He compares this loss to drowning in a dark ocean where the person is not sure if they even want to swim back to the surface. He hates how a loved one's scent and voice start to fade away over time. However, Easton sees a big difference between two types of grief. There is the grief of death, and then there is the grief of losing someone who is still alive. He has survived the silence of death, but he thinks losing a living person is much worse. Knowing that person is still out there living their life without you is a special kind of torture. He feels this pain clearly while standing in a church, looking at a man across the aisle. That man is his stepbrother, Cannon. Easton felt they were meant to be together, but their love ended in a terrible collapse. Now, just looking at Cannon in the church shreds Easton's soul. He remembers their first kiss and how it felt to wake up next to him. A single look brings all those old feelings back, and Easton feels like he is drowning again. There is still a small flicker of hope in his chest that maybe they could try a third time. But he knows hope is dangerous. It can keep you afloat for a while, but it can also be the weight that pulls you under until it is too late. The story shifts back to their final days of high school. Easton stands outside the bathroom, yelling for Cannon to hurry up. He is annoyed because Cannon is always slow and doesn't care that they have to share the space. Easton considers using their parents' bathroom, but decides to wait out of spite. He reminds himself that Cannon will be leaving for college soon, and the long years of sharing a room will finally be over. When the door opens, Cannon is damp from the shower and only half-dressed. Easton tries to look away, but he cannot help noticing Cannon's athletic build. Cannon sees him looking. He always sees it. There is a thick tension between them as Cannon walks past. Ever since Easton came out as gay, he has been waiting for Cannon to say something about the obvious attraction, but Cannon always ignores it. Easton tells himself his feelings are just physical, but deep down, he knows that is a lie. Their relationship is full of resentment. Cannon does not hate gay people, but his problem with Easton is personal and very old. Easton also feels a lot of jealousy toward Cannon's perfect girlfriend, Cassidy. She is a cheerleader, and their parents love her. Watching them together makes Easton's stomach turn. In the kitchen, their mother asks Cannon about his last day of school. Cannon just shrugs. Their father, David, watches Cannon with an intense pressure that Easton does not understand. Easton tries to break the tension with a sarcastic comment about being glad Cannon is leaving. This makes Cannon's jaw tighten. Their mother scolds Easton, but David directs his anger at Cannon instead. This is a common pattern in their house. Easton keeps pushing, mocking Cannon and taking his drink just to get a reaction. Cannon says he hates him, and the tension follows them outside. Cannon never wanted this life or this new family, and Easton became the easy target for his anger. They drive in silence to pick up Cassidy. She is annoyed because they are late. As she talks about their future plans for college and trips, Easton gets fed up. He laughs and tells them what everyone else is already thinking. He says their relationship will not last and will be over by the summer. Cannon slams on the brakes in a rage, demanding an apology, but Easton refuses to take it back. Cannon sits in his doorless jeep, glaring at Easton through the mirror. He is tired of the insults and the way Easton treats Cassidy like she is invisible. Cannon feels no brotherly bond with Easton. He only feels resentment toward the son his father actually wanted. He hates his hometown and is counting the days until he can escape. He remembers when his father promised they would be best friends, but after 9 years of fighting, he knows that was a lie. Cannon snaps at Easton to shut up and tries to check on Cassidy. The truth of Easton's words about their breakup is hanging over them. Cannon is going to South Carolina for school, and Cassidy is going to Washington. The distance feels impossible. When Cannon demands an apology again, Easton says he won't apologize for the truth. Cannon accuses Easton of being obsessed with his life. The fight only stops when Cassidy yells at Cannon for being rude. As they drive to school, Cannon wonders why Easton looks at him with so much lust. Even more confusing is that Cannon sometimes looks back at Easton the same way. He knows Easton is very attractive, and he wonders if he might be bi-curious. This makes him even more frustrated. When they get to school, Cannon tells Easton to get out. Once they are alone, Cassidy cries and admits that Easton was right. They are breaking up. Cannon tries to comfort her, but he knows the words are empty. A month after school ends, Easton is at the beach. The ocean is his sanctuary, a place where he feels truly happy. He has been surfing every day. He still has to share the Jeep with Cannon, which was a rule made by their parents. Easton thinks about how close he is with his mother and how things changed when David and Cannon joined their lives. He wanted a brother at first, but things turned into a decade of war. While Easton is looking at the waves, Cannon smacks him on the head and runs into the water with his surfboard. Easton follows him out, annoyed that he ever taught Cannon how to surf because now he has to watch him be good at it. However, the water helps wash away the tension from the house. Since the breakup with Cassidy, Cannon has been very quiet. But that morning, he actually asked to go surfing with Easton. It was a rare olive branch. While they are sitting on their boards, Easton asks if Cannon is still mad about the breakup. Cannon says no. He cared for Cassidy but knew it had to end eventually. Easton apologizes for what he said in the car. Cannon accepts and then apologizes for his own mean comments. He tells Easton that he doesn't have a problem with him being gay. Easton stays silent, his mind racing. He knows he is obsessed with Cannon, but he cannot say it. He just says everything is fine. He makes a clumsy hand gesture that makes Cannon laugh. It is a real, happy laugh. For the first time in 9 years, they feel a sense of harmony. Easton feels like he could get used to this new peace. The morning truce on the water leads to a new adventure as Cannon drives the Jeep inland. Easton is skeptical when he learns they are heading to a party in Portland. He worries about the risks of drinking, but Cannon dismisses his fears. Cannon promises to teach him how to really have fun during their last month together. This makes Easton's heart race with a mix of hope and fear. He realizes he is acting like a fool, completely caught up in his feelings for his stepbrother. 2 hours into the party, Easton is very drunk. He has no experience with alcohol and quickly loses track of Cannon in the crowded house. To escape the heat and the smell of beer, he wanders out to the porch and finds Cannon sitting alone on a swing. Easton joins him, accidentally drinking whiskey instead of beer. Cannon warns him about mixing drinks, but it is already too late. They sit in silence until Easton finds the courage to speak. The alcohol loosens his tongue, and he asks Cannon why he has to want the one person he can't have. He calls Cannon the full package, athletic, smart, and incredibly attractive. The conversation gets dangerous when Easton tells Cannon he would be perfect if he liked men too. He even offers to let Cannon teach him things, spurred by the dark look in Cannon's eyes. Cannon doesn't push him away. Easton moves closer, touching Cannon's jaw and whispering that he wants to kiss him. For a moment, it feels like it might actually happen. Cannon says no, but he doesn't move back. The intimate moment is suddenly broken when the porch door slams open. Friends run out, yelling that the cops are coming. The situation turns violent when a football player named Cole recognizes Easton. Cole claims Easton hit on him earlier and starts shouting insults. Cannon's protective side takes over. When Cole punches Easton in the face and ribs, Cannon explodes into a fury. He grabs Cole in a headlock, and a massive brawl breaks out on the porch. The fight only stops when 4 police cars arrive. Panic spreads as people run. Easton refuses to leave Cannon's side, even as the police restrain them both. By the end of the night, both boys are handcuffed in the back of a squad car. Hours pass in a cold holding cell. While the other boys involved are picked up, Cannon and Easton are left to wait. Cannon feels guilty, realizing how close he came to kissing Easton on the porch. Finally, Cannon's father, David, arrives. He is in a state of pure, cold rage. He orders Cannon to get Easton, who has humiliated himself by soiling his clothes because he was too embarrassed to use the cell toilet. David uses his legal connections to get them released, but the car ride home is a nightmare of silence and shame. When they arrive at the house, Rachel meets them with concern, but David is finished. In the kitchen, David reveals he has known about Cannon's partying for years. He accuses Cannon of being a bad influence and dragging Easton into trouble. Cannon tries to defend himself, but David has made a cold decision. He slides a check for $50,000 across the counter. He tells Cannon that since he never wanted to be part of the family, he is finally being given what he wants. He gives Cannon an ultimatum: be gone by morning. Cannon falls to his knees, sobbing and begging to stay, but David refuses to even look at him. Cannon packs his bags in a state of shock and drives away, crossing the state line in tears, leaving his only home behind. 7 years pass. Cannon now lives in Charleston, South Carolina. He is a civil engineer and is engaged to a law student named Anna. On the surface, his life is perfect, but it feels like a facade. He has not spoken to his family since the night he was kicked out. Anna pushes him to reconcile, asking for his parents' address so she can send a wedding invitation. Cannon reflects on how he struggled after the money ran out and how Anna's wealthy family helped him. He admits to himself that he feels pressured into the marriage and still hides his attraction to men. He hasn't forgotten the night on the porch or Easton's whispered confession. One morning, Cannon's routine is shattered by persistent phone calls from an Oregon area code. His ex-girlfriend, Cassidy, finally reaches him with devastating news. David and Rachel have been in a horrific car accident and are in critical condition. Despite the years of bitterness, Cannon's instincts take over. He flies back to Oregon, feeling hollow as he returns to a place that no longer feels like home. At the hospital, he meets a pregnant Cassidy and a doctor who explains the situation. The doctor reveals that David and Rachel are brain dead with no signs of activity. They are only being kept alive by machines. Because they are both incapacitated, the legal responsibility for their lives falls to Cannon. He is shocked to learn that his father never removed him as the medical proxy. The man who disowned him has now placed his life in Cannon's hands. Cannon has to decide whether to withdraw life support after 30 days if there is no improvement. It is a crushing irony. Cannon decides to see them right away. He walks into the ICU, hearing the rhythmic sound of the ventilators. But his attention is caught by someone sitting by Rachel's bed. It is a man with dark hair and intricate tattoos covering his arms. He is holding Rachel's hand, looking completely devastated. Cannon barely recognizes him as the stepbrother he left behind. When the door closes, the man looks up. His gray eyes are no longer full of sadness, they are sharp with pure fury. Easton stays at Cannon with a look of total accusation. He is clearly shocked and angry to see the brother who vanished 7 years ago. The two men stand on opposite sides of the room, and it is clear that Easton is absolutely livid. Easton blinks, hoping the man standing in the ICU is just a hallucination. But Cannon is real, and seeing him talk to the doctor after 7 years of silence makes Easton's blood boil. In a burst of rage, Easton crosses the room and grabs Cannon by the collar, slamming him against the wall. Cannon doesn't even fight back. Despite his anger, Easton's mind betrays him, briefly remembering the crush he had as a teenager and the night they almost kissed before Cannon vanished. Easton snarls, demanding to know why Cannon is here acting like part of a family he abandoned. Cannon tries to stay calm, but Easton scoffs at the idea of him having any rights here. Then, the doctor reveals the truth. Cannon is the legal healthcare proxy for both parents. The news hits Easton like a physical punch. He paces the room, unable to understand how the son who was kicked out and stayed away for a decade is now the one in charge of their lives. He accuses Cannon of worming his way back in, but Cannon is just as shocked as he is. The reality is painful for Easton. His parents trusted the exiled son over the one who stayed. Easton demands that Cannon sign over his rights and leave, but Cannon refuses. He intends to stay until this is over. Easton begs him to fight the 30-day limit on the medical directive, but Cannon's pragmatism feels like a death sentence. Easton screams that he is the one who has been there the whole time. He slams his fist into the wall, his voice breaking from grief. He warns Cannon to stay out of his way, but as he leaves, he resolves to act as a human shield for his parents. The next day, Easton finds Cannon's jeep at their parents' house. Cannon is inside, half-naked and exercising, and the sight of him immediately puts Easton on the defensive. He asks why Cannon isn't staying in a hotel. During the argument, a flustered Easton accidentally offers his own spare room as an alternative. He regrets it instantly, but Cannon's genuine smile makes it impossible to take back. Living together quickly becomes a nightmare for Easton. His home on the bluff is now filled with Cannon's presence. He feels on edge everywhere, even at the local grocery store. At the store, a neighbor named Lucinda greets Cannon like a hero. As she begins talking about funeral arrangements and final proceedings, Easton's grip on his sanity slips. He snaps, shouting in the middle of the aisle that his parents aren't even dead yet. He feels like everyone has already given up on them. When Cannon looks at him with pity and tries to touch his arm, Easton can't take it. The grocery store becomes a scene of a public meltdown. Easton feels like he is being engulfed by a tsunami of despair. Overwhelmed by rage and denial, he does the only thing he can do. He runs. Cannon tries to stay away from the hospital to keep the peace. He knows Easton is there every hour, so he makes himself scarce. He feels like a pariah in town, watched by gossiping neighbors. Seeking an escape from the tension, Cannon goes to the ICU alone. He sits between the two beds, listening to the rhythmic sound of the ventilators. He is not just the proxy, he is also the executor of their estate. He grapples with the irony of being given this power by the father who once paid him $50,000 to disappear. Looking at David's warm but lifeless body, Cannon breaks down. "Why me, Dad?" He pleads with the silent room. He asks why David chose him over Easton, the perfect child. Beneath his anger is a deep well of remorse. He confesses that he regrets taking the money and the easy way out 7 years ago. He mourns the phone calls he ignored in the months before the accident. When he returns to Easton's house late that night, loud music is blaring. He finds Easton on the porch in a drunken, stoned haze. They trade insults until Cannon snaps, reminding Easton that his legal status means he isn't going anywhere. Eventually, the bickering stops. Cannon pulls out a bottle of whiskey, and to his surprise, Easton taps his beer bottle against it in a silent toast. After an hour of drinking, Easton asks if this grief feels the same as when Cannon's biological mother died. Cannon admits it is similar, but this accident was a violent shock. They both agree on one word to describe the feeling: drowning. Easton is desperate to know when the pain will stop, but Cannon has no concrete answers. Easton confesses that it hurts to even breathe and that he feels like he is dying alongside his mother. Cannon is gutted by Easton's pain and wants to offer comfort, but their history makes it complicated. Easton's despair turns back into anger. He begs Cannon to stop treating him with kid gloves and give him something real. As Easton shouts, Cannon's armor finally cracks. He grabs Easton's neck to force eye contact, and in that moment of vulnerability, the walls between them collapse. Easton initiates a kiss that catches Cannon off guard, but instinct takes over. Cannon tastes the salt of Easton's tears and the sting of whiskey. It is primal and possessive. Easton pins Cannon against the balcony rail, his touch igniting a fire. Despite his engagement to Anna and the fact that they are legally brothers, Cannon cannot stop. Easton is using him as an anchor. The physical tension moves into a frantic, animalistic grinding. Easton straddles Cannon's lap, their bodies pressing together. The friction is a mixture of heaven and hell. When Easton pleads for Cannon to go further, Cannon's rational mind finally resurfaces. He manages to pull back before they cross an irredeemable line. He carries a heavily intoxicated Easton upstairs, strips him to his underwear, and tucks him into bed. Watching Easton sleep, Cannon is hit by a wave of self-loathing. He admits that Easton is a fantasy he never allowed himself to explore. He feels like a terrible person for cheating on his fiancée and for his role as a proxy. He goes to the bathroom and looks in the mirror. His lips are swollen, and his neck is marked with red signs of Easton's teeth and stubble. He is physically pained by his own arousal, but the psychological weight of the betrayal feels like a sickness. He tries to wash away the night in the shower, but the image of Easton on the bed haunts him. Cannon seeks a lonely release, his body betraying his conscience as he finds satisfaction with Easton's name on his lips. Easton drives home from the hospital early to beat an incoming winter storm. The rain smacks against his windshield while he thinks about the one-sided conversations he just had with his unresponsive parents. He wishes his mother could guide him through the medical choices and the growing tension with Cannon. Over the last week, Cannon has changed. He is no longer just distant, he is actively avoiding Easton. He refuses to make eye contact and leaves any room Easton enters. This heavy silence makes Easton feel more alone than ever. He is angry that Cannon left the family years ago and only returned when everything was falling apart. When he finally reaches home, Easton is on edge. Inside the garage, Cannon is unloading groceries. Easton tries to help, but Cannon shuts him down immediately. The rejection stings, and the silence in the kitchen becomes unbearable. Easton demands to know what is wrong, but Cannon refuses to speak. In a moment of pure frustration, Easton sweeps a stack of papers off the counter to get a reaction. As he picks them up, he realizes they are not just random notes. It is a detailed checklist in Cannon's handwriting. It outlines everything that needs to happen after their parents die, from funeral plans to selling the house and the bakery. To Easton, who is still holding on to hope, this feels like a betrayal. Cannon has already given up. The tension becomes sharp and dangerous. Easton lashes out, accusing Cannon of trying to erase their parents before they are even gone. He voices his deepest fear, that once they are dead, he will be completely alone. His anger spirals, and he dares Cannon to do whatever he wants because nothing matters anymore. When he sees pity in Cannon's eyes, it fuels his rage even more. Cannon finally snaps, breaking his calm control. He tells Easton the harsh truth that their parents are gone and are never coming back. Instead of backing down, Easton strikes back with the cruelest words possible. He tells Cannon he wishes it had been him in the accident instead. The words hang in the air, and Easton regrets them instantly. He sees a raw, unguarded pain on Cannon's face. Cannon admits that he has also thought about trading places and knows he isn't the family Easton wants. Overwhelmed by guilt and anger, Easton turns and runs. Cannon watches from the window as Easton's Bronco peels out into the storm. A sharp dread grips him. He knows that when the world gets too heavy, Easton goes to the ocean. The sky has turned an ominous green, signaling a brutal storm. After several calls go to voicemail, Cannon's intuition tells him Easton is in the water. He grabs his keys and races toward the beach. The scene at the shore is terrifying. The wind is violent, and the rain feels like knives. Cannon finds the Bronco, but the surfboard is gone. He screams Easton's name, but the sound is swallowed by the surf. Finally, he spots a speck of orange, Easton's board, in the dark horizon. Relief and rage war within him. He watches as Easton waits for a wave. Suddenly, Easton paddles into a massive swell that is heading straight for jagged rocks. The wave is a trap. It collapses far too quickly, and a crushing wall of water and foam takes Easton down. For agonizing minutes, Cannon is paralyzed by terror. He screams again, a feral roar against the storm. Then, he sees the orange board 50 yards away. Easton pulls himself up, and Cannon's heart finally resumes its rhythm. As soon as Easton reaches the sand, Cannon's fear turns into white-hot rage. He shoves Easton in the chest, asking if he is trying to get himself killed. Easton tries to brush past him, but Cannon spins him around. He sees a jagged gash on Easton's forehead leaking blood. Despite the injury, Easton remains defiant. The argument turns vicious. Cannon accuses Easton of making a fool of himself, while Easton claims Cannon could never understand his hell. Cannon's restraint snaps. He pins Easton against the Bronco, shouting that he has lost people too. He tells Easton that not everyone chooses self-destruction to mourn. Easton lashes out at Cannon's need for control, even insulting his fiancée. Cannon breathes through the urge to hit him. He realizes Easton is losing his mind. Finally, Cannon roars the truth. He is staying because Easton is his family and he cannot lose him too. The confession silences the storm. Easton screams back, asking if Cannon ever thought the grave is exactly where he wants to be. The admission of Easton's desire to sink rather than swim robs Cannon of his breath. The anger vanishes, replaced by hollow despair. Cannon leans his forehead against Easton's cold shoulder in total defeat. He repeats his plea, telling him he cannot lose him. He is terrified of the hopelessness in Easton's eyes. Easton finally breaks the silence, whispering Cannon's name. Cannon pulls back to meet his gaze. As they breathe each other in, Easton's fingers tighten in Cannon's hair, pulling him closer. Their mouths collide. The kiss shatters Easton's last grip on sanity. It is a choice born from desperation. As the rain pours, Easton is flooded with conflict, wondering if this is true longing or just self-sabotage. But Cannon does not pull away, he kisses back. The contact feels like an unraveling of years of pain and loneliness. It is as if Cannon is taking all of Easton's trauma and tossing it into the waves. Easton clutches Cannon's hair, terrified the moment will end. He fears that by giving in to his desire, he is risking the last person he has left. Easton pulls back for air, seeing confusion on Cannon's face. He starts to apologize, but Cannon cups his face and crashes his mouth back against Easton's. The kiss intensifies instantly. Cannon's tongue licks Easton's lips, sending electricity through him. He pulls Easton flush against him, their soaked clothes offering no barrier to their heat. Sensing Easton's internal retreat, Cannon whispers for him to take what he needs. The permission ignites a fire. Cannon sinks his teeth into Easton's lip, and the last shred of restraint snaps. Easton grips Cannon's hips and spins him around, slamming his back against the Bronco door. They grind together in a frenzy of passion. Easton begins to unbutton Cannon's shirt, kneading skin on skin. He knows this moment might be temporary and destructive, but he has never felt more alive. He is no longer drowning in grief, he is drowning in Cannon. His hands seek more heat as he undoes Cannon's belt. Before he can go further, Cannon catches him by the neck. Panting, Cannon says 2 words, "Not here." He wants their first time to be in a bed or a shower, somewhere they can have time. Easton nods, his head spinning with a mirrored need. They pull apart and get into the car. The 7-minute drive from the beach to the house has never felt longer in his life. The tension from the beach follows Cannon and Easton back into the garage. Cannon finds it hard to think clearly while locked in a small space with his stepbrother. Once they are safe, Cannon admits he is terrified of losing Easton to reckless behavior. He confesses that the thought of identifying Easton's body at a morgue is driving him to the brink. Easton offers a wicked smile but eventually turns serious and apologizes. He admits he is struggling to keep it together. Cannon promises he would do almost anything to see the person Easton used to be before grief took over. As they enter the house, a heavy silence hangs between them. Cannon reflects on their kiss, viewing it as an anchor that Easton desperately needs to survive. At the top of the stairs, Cannon suggests a warm shower to shake off the storm. Easton counters with an invitation for Cannon to join him. When they enter the bathroom, the rising steam adds to the scalding tension. Easton asks if he should be vocal about his needs, and Cannon's resolve finally shatters. He asks Easton directly what he requires. Easton's answer is simple: he just needs Cannon. Choosing to embrace the danger, Cannon tells him to have him. They strip away their soaked clothes and fall into a passionate embrace. Cannon is awestruck by the sight of him, realizing that their history and the fact that Easton is a man no longer matter. They reach their climax together in the shower, a shared moment of ecstasy that leaves them trembling. In the aftermath, Cannon hides his guilt over his fiancée, Anna. Seeing Easton smile for the first time in weeks makes the internal conflict feel worth it. When Easton asks him to stay the night, Cannon crawls into bed and pulls Easton's naked body against his own, bridging the gap between his head and heart. Easton wakes at dawn to find the bed empty. Cannon has already slipped away to handle work and funeral logistics. Easton feels a weight of guilt knowing Cannon is engaged, yet he is baffled by their connection. In the kitchen, he pushes Cannon to acknowledge the shift in their relationship. The confrontation leads to a revelation. Cannon reveals they actually made out a week prior when Easton was blackout drunk. He explains that he refused to go further then because Easton was intoxicated. Easton is stunned but relieved when Cannon admits he doesn't regret what has happened. The air lightens, and the banter turns sexual once more. Easton boldly reissues his offer to let Cannon have him, enjoying how he can knock the composed man off kilter. Cannon tries to bring up Anna, noting that what they are doing is wrong. However, his fingers dig into Easton's arms with a different message. He begs Easton to make him walk away because he cannot do it himself. Easton pulls him into a rough kiss that eclipses everything else. Against the kitchen counter, Easton asks if it is like this with Anna. Cannon whispers that it is not like this with anyone else. Easton drops to his knees, treating the act with carnal desperation. He wants to ensure Cannon keeps coming back for more. They reach a synchronized climax, and Cannon kisses Easton deeply, tasting himself on Easton's tongue. When Easton pleads for Cannon to keep him, it is a request for the impossible. Over the next week, a surprising camaraderie replaces their toxic history. Their dynamic evolves into a friendship bolstered by mutual exploration. They avoid discussing Anna, and Easton remains wary of getting addicted to someone who is still planning to marry someone else. However, they find common ground in their grief. Easton notices that Cannon's obsession with planning is his way of coping. This leads Easton to offer help while Cannon sorts through old photo albums. They sit at the dining table, looking through years of memories. Easton laughs at a story about his first birthday, where he puked and tried to eat the regurgitated cake. As they work, Easton finds a photo from a childhood trip to the zoo. In the picture, a young Cannon is looking at Easton with a smile of pure affection. Easton secretly pockets the photo, feeling a tighten in his chest at the evidence of a bond he hadn't realized existed. He also notices a lack of photos of Cannon's life before their families joined, realizing how isolated Cannon must have felt. Easton offers a sincere apology for his past cruelty. Cannon, in a moment of devastating honesty, says he wishes he could trade places with Rachel. He knows how much Easton needs his mother and promises he is doing his best to fill the void. Easton is left speechless by Cannon's selflessness, but he keeps his deeper feelings buried to protect his heart. Day 30 arrives at Portland General. It is the final milestone for Rachel and David. Easton sits in the car, defined by a crushing sense of dread. Cannon squeezes his hand, promising they will get through it together. Inside the hospital, the scent of cleaning supplies weighs on them. In the conference room, the doctor says the words Easton has been dreading, they are gone. The sounds in the room become fuzzy. While Cannon asks the practical questions, Easton is trapped in a vacuum of grief. Once the ventilators are switched off, Easton stays at his mother's bedside, timing his breaths with her heart rate monitor. The stillness feels like it spans lifetimes. David passes quickly, and the flatlining monitor sends a wave of guilty relief through Easton because his mother is still there. He watches Cannon, who remains a stoic pillar of strength even as his own father is wheeled away. Cannon does not cry, he only offers Easton a bone-crushing squeeze of the hand. Then, the inevitable happens. Rachel's monitor emits a long, steady beep. Any lingering hope for a miracle dies instantly. A guttural wail of pure desolation rips from Easton's throat. He tries to flee the room, but Cannon catches him. Cannon hauls Easton against his chest and sandwiches him against the wall to keep him from crumpling. As Easton is shredded by sobs, Cannon cups his face and presses their foreheads together. He whispers that Easton is not alone and that he has him. Cannon acts as a human anchor in the middle of the emotional storm. Easton can feel the strain in Cannon's own voice and the heat of his touch. He burrows into Cannon's neck, begging for the warmth to mend his broken soul. When the nurse enters to silence the monitor, the resulting peace feels eerie. Cannon leads Easton to a small sofa, never loosening his grip. Cannon's voice cracks as he calls Easton baby and reassures him he isn't going anywhere. This display of raw emotion from Cannon only deepens the agony. Easton feels himself shattering completely, reduced to broken pieces that he fears even his anchor won't be able to hold together. Cannon thought he understood pain, but watching Easton splinter apart in the hospital is a different kind of agony. Easton's body racks with silent, convulsive sobs. In a moment that defies public decency, Cannon lets Easton climb into his lap and hide his face in his neck. Cannon remembers that he never had this kind of support when his own mother died. His father was always too lost in his own world. Now, Cannon vows to be the one to drag Easton to the top of the mountain of grief, no matter how many times he stumbles. The journey home is a blur. Cannon feels as though he is absorbing Easton's trauma as his own, struggling to keep someone else's head above water while he is drowning too. Back at the house, the air is heavy with a downpour that shields them from the world. Cannon watches Easton undress on autopilot, moving like a ghost. He fears the old Easton is slipping away and prays he will eventually return. Without being asked, Cannon slides into bed beside him. It is a selfish necessity. He needs the warmth of Easton's skin and the sound of his heart. As they lie in the dark, Cannon makes a silent vow to Rachel's memory. He commits to keeping Easton whole and being whatever is required to ensure nothing ever breaks his heart like this again. Easton is living in a personal hell, a hollow chasm opening in his chest. He traces Cannon's face in the moonlight, seeking a connection to heal his soul. He is baffled by Cannon's stoic strength. The physical proximity ignites a desperate need that briefly overrides his grief. Easton initiates a passionate kiss, starving for the life Cannon represents. Cannon briefly protests, fearing they are using sex as a hollow distraction, but Easton pleads with him. He needs to feel something other than the knife-like pain in his lungs. Cannon relents, and they destroy each other with a kiss that proves they are still alive. For the first time, they engage in unprotected intimacy. This decision signifies a deeper level of trust and belonging. Cannon takes control, preparing Easton with a tenderness that contrasts with their hunger. Easton explains that this is their way of grieving, a way to remind themselves they are still here. When Cannon finally enters him, Easton feels complete for the first time. The pain melts into the fire of their connection. Cannon rolls them over so Easton is on top, giving him the power he needs. Easton rides him with gratitude and love, telling Cannon he owns every inch of him. They reach an explosive climax together. In the aftermath, Cannon provides a peace that allows Easton to finally sleep. Just before drifting off, Easton murmurs that he could live in this moment forever. Easton falls asleep before he can hear Cannon's silent admission, "Me too." Cannon remains awake, exhausted but unable to rest. He reflects on his betrayal of Anna. For weeks, he has ignored her calls, torn between the life he is supposed to lead and the pull he feels toward Easton. In the quiet, Cannon watches Easton's peaceful face. Needing to let his own mask slip, he heads downstairs to the balcony. The cold February air is a balm, but he is haunted by the reality that his father is truly gone. The words echo in his mind, sparking a tidal wave of repressed emotion. A low sob escapes him as he realizes he will never hear his father's voice again. He recalls the night he was kicked out 7 years ago and the disdain in David's voice. He remembers a phone call he received from David weeks after leaving. David had been cold, eventually asking Cannon to come home for the holidays. Consumed by rage, Cannon had snapped, calling his father a liar and telling him he wasn't wanted. Despite a text from Rachel saying David truly missed him, Cannon had blocked their numbers and ignored them for years. He lived with the belief they were better off without him. The weight of this grudge and the finality of death break Cannon's armor. On the balcony, he drops against the railing, paralyzed by a silent scream. He cries for the relationship they lost and the stubbornness that kept them apart. He feels the cloud of regret clawing at his sanity. As the sun begins to rise, Cannon makes a final resolution. He refuses to repeat these mistakes with the only family he has left. He returns to Easton's room and pulls him close, vowing that he will not lose him too. He anchors himself to the living as he lets go of the ghost of his father. The funeral process is a grueling ritual that Cannon likens to picking at a scab. He is desperate to shield Easton from the suffering. Over the past week, Easton has fluctuated between screaming fury and numb stupors, finding solace only in his nightly need for Cannon. Cannon knows this coping mechanism is unhealthy, and he feels his own identity shattering to help Easton rebuild his. The wake is a long affair attended by many well-wishers. Amidst the heavy scent of flowers, Cannon receives a text from Anna. Before he can process it, Easton appears and drags him away from the crowd. They find a secluded storage closet, and the atmosphere shifts to frantic desperation. Easton locks the door and hauls Cannon into an embrace, begging for him. Despite the risk of discovery, Cannon enables him. Easton asks Cannon to have him like their connection is real, and Cannon gives in. The encounter is raw. Easton services him before being pressed against the door. To keep Easton quiet, Cannon gags him with his own necktie. They reach a synchronized climax in the dark. Afterward, a glassy-eyed Easton admits that Cannon is the only thing making the pain bearable. The weight of this confession leaves Cannon shredded. He realizes the precariousness of their situation. Because Easton's suit is ruined, Cannon tells him to use the jeep and go home to change. Easton departs, leaving Cannon to school his features and return to the lobby alone. Cannon tries to act as though nothing has happened, but as he approaches a family friend, he feels the eyes of the room following him. The friend, Miss L, shatters his composure. She warns him that enabling Easton will only make matters worse. She reveals that she has seen the way Easton has looked at him since they were children, and that she sees Cannon looking back the same way. Cannon admits his only goal is to put Easton back together, but she warns him that a failure could result in Easton mourning even more. A chilling realization hits Cannon as he scans the room. He sees the empathetic and knowing stares of the attendees. He realizes that Miss L is not the only one who knows. Every last person in the funeral parlor has seen through their facade. A week has passed since the funeral, and Easton is still trapped in a cycle of exhaustion. He struggles to keep his head above water, retreating from the pitying stares of the townspeople. His world has narrowed down to a desperate need for Cannon. Since the incident in the storage closet, an awkward distance has grown between them. Easton feels deep shame, worrying that he is tainting Cannon by turning him into a cheater. Seeking comfort, he finds Cannon on the balcony and embraces him from behind. Cannon gently pushes him to talk, and Easton confesses his guilt about pulling Cannon down into his grief. Cannon refuses to let Easton carry that burden. He explains that he is responsible for his own choices and that his recent distance was just to give Easton space. He tells Easton that while he can provide the pieces for healing, the actual work belongs to Easton. Then, Easton addresses the primary wound of his past, the night Cannon left 7 years ago. He reveals how much it gutted him when Cannon disappeared without a goodbye. To his surprise, Cannon admits he wanted that almost first kiss years ago too. But the biggest revelation comes when Cannon quietly corrects him about leaving for college. He says it wasn't his choice. When Easton's mind begins to spin, Cannon refuses to say more, wanting to protect Easton's memory of his parents while he is still so raw. 2 weeks later, Easton begins to notice fragile signs of healing. He wakes up to the warmth of Cannon's arm instead of the image of his mother's casket. He still struggles with guilt, wondering if it is too soon to feel the air getting lighter. Cannon senses the lingering darkness and makes Easton promise never to quit, no matter how hopeless life feels. He gives Easton permission to break, but forbids him from giving up. Moved by the desperation in Cannon's voice, Easton promises to hold on. To mark this new step, they visit a tattoo shop in Seaside. Cannon watches with curiosity as 2 swallows are etched onto Easton's collarbone for Rachel and David. Outside the shop, Easton confesses he feels guilty for being able to smile while his parents are dead. Cannon reminds him there is no timeline for grief and that happiness is not a betrayal. He urges Easton to find his solace and never let go. Easton realizes that Cannon is the very thing making his life worth living. He snakes his arms around Cannon's waist and burrows his face into his neck. When Cannon asks what he is doing, Easton simply says he is holding on. It is a silent vow that he is never letting go of the man who has become his entire world. Cannon notices Easton slipping back into guilt and decides they need to reconnect through surfing. The change in Easton is instant. His eyes light up at the suggestion. The experience in the frigid water is restorative. Cannon hasn't surfed in 7 years, but he feels rejuvenated by the ocean and the sight of Easton's flawless movements. He reflects on how Easton has become fundamental to his happiness. Despite the judgmental glances from patrons at a local cafe, Cannon feels a fierce protectiveness over their bond. During this time, he experiences a profound realization. He realizes he is in love with Easton, a deep, romantic devotion. On the sand at sunset, they share a moment of pure happiness. Cannon admits he noticed Easton's affection for him years ago but pretended not to see it. He explains he left years ago because he didn't want Easton to become jaded like him. Easton's response is heartbreaking. He never wanted to be like Cannon, he just wanted to be with him. They share a passionate kiss on the beach, a physical sign of the love Cannon has finally acknowledged. When Cannon asks what Easton wants as a prize for winning their race to the shore, Easton's wicked smirk promises a night that will further cement their connection. Back at the house, they are in a state of feral desire. They stumble from the garage to the kitchen, struggling to get out of their damp wetsuits. When a zipper jams, Easton uses a kitchen knife to slice Cannon's suit open. The sound of ripping neoprene acts as a starting gun. Usually the dominant one, Cannon pulls back and makes a frantic request. He wants Easton to be the one to take control. Easton is surprised but finds the idea incredibly appealing. He commands Cannon to turn around and lean over the counter, using coconut oil to tease and prep him. Easton's dominance grows as he finds new ways to shatter Cannon's composure. He treats Cannon's body with a carnal desperation, pushing him to the brink with slow movements and deep intensity. When he finally slides into Cannon, the sensation is unreal. As they find their rhythm, Easton realizes this is about more than escaping grief. It is about the mending of two tattered souls. He realizes that over the last few weeks, they have traded pieces of themselves until they belong to each other. Healing each other has transformed their bond into something permanent. The climax is explosive. Cannon reaches his limit first, and Easton follows immediately into an ecstatic release. In the aftermath, Cannon turns to kiss him with a smile that lights Easton's soul on fire. Easton knows that if he wasn't already in love, this moment would have sealed it. As he pulls away, he notices his own release leaking from Cannon and instinctively presses his thumb against him to keep it inside. When Cannon teases him about being possessive, Easton just hums in agreement. He has been given the key to a kingdom he never expected to own, and he has no intention of letting go of what he has officially claimed as his. The morning begins in a blissful bubble. Cannon wakes up to find Easton staring at him with a genuine, happy smile. Despite the physical soreness Cannon feels after their transformative night together, the atmosphere is light and playful. They exchange jokes about Cannon's lack of sharing skills, but beneath the humor, Cannon feels Easton's happiness seeping into his own skin. He realizes their connection has reached a level of raw, all-consuming intimacy that makes Easton feel like home. Cannon wonders if he wants this to be a permanent relationship, even though he fears such a reality is impossible. The playfulness continues into the kitchen, where Easton insists on cooking breakfast. Cannon watches from the kitchen island, teasing Easton for his lack of culinary skills and showing him the right way to scramble eggs. They share a tender moment at the stove, and Easton admits that the night before was the best experience of his life. Just as the intimacy peaks and Easton traps Cannon against the counter for a deep kiss, the doorbell rings. Cannon assumes it is a neighbor, but when Easton returns from the door, the light has vanished from his face. He is white-knuckling the counter, looking defeated. With 3 words, he signals a catastrophic shift. It's for you. Cannon rounds the corner to find his fiancée, Anna, standing on the doorstep. The shock is physical. Cannon realizes he is standing before his fiancée in nothing but his underwear, showing the signs of his earlier intimacy with Easton. Anna, oblivious and smiling, jumps into his arms. Cannon's stomach rolls as he feels the heat of Easton's fury and pain radiating from the kitchen. He realizes his weeks of dodging her calls prompted her to fly across the country to find him. He is forced to return Anna's kiss while acutely aware that Easton is watching the betrayal unfold. The fragile happiness they built is shattered when Anna announces she has come to bring Cannon home to South Carolina. The blissful bubble is violently punctured. After an excruciatingly awkward breakfast, Cannon and Anna retreat to the deck. Easton eavesdrops from the kitchen, hearing every word of the argument through the glass door. Anna's declaration that she came to bring him home serves as a brutal reminder of where Cannon's life truly lies. While Easton's heart had begun to believe that Cannon belonged in Oregon, the The reality of Cannon's career and future in Charleston makes that hope feel like a dangerous delusion. He realizes he has fallen more in love with Cannon than he ever thought possible. But listening to Anna, he is forced to face the fact that their time together does not equate to loyalty. The argument reaches a painful climax when Anna asks why Cannon is so hung up on a family he hasn't spoken to in years. Cannon responds that he cannot just leave Easton here with no one. This realization guts Easton. He believes Cannon's desire to stay is rooted in pity and protective worry rather than a real need to be with him. He feels patronized, reduced to a helpless child that Cannon feels obligated to monitor. The hurt is sharp, fueled by the realization that he let himself get in too deep. Anna issues an ultimatum. She has 2 tickets back to Charleston for the day after tomorrow. She expects him to be on that flight. Easton is left with a cold, clear-eyed understanding that Cannon belongs to Anna and Charleston, and their interludes were never meant to be a permanent bridge. In the 48 hours after Anna's arrival, the connection between Cannon and Easton is systematically dismantled. Lying in bed beside his fiancée, Cannon is consumed by rage. He feels trapped in a nightmare, realizing he has fallen in love with his stepbrother. He decides he is willing to give up everything, his career and his future, to be with Easton. However, when he finds Easton on the patio, the atmosphere is thick with a silence that signals the end of their playing pretend. Easton, believing Cannon is leaving for good, begins to cut him open with cold efficiency. He tells Cannon there is no reason for him to stay and that they aren't even family anymore. Easton claims he is okay now and dismisses their intimacy as a byproduct of dark days. He urges Cannon to go back to Anna because that is the way it is supposed to be. This pushes Cannon to the breaking point. He realizes Easton has given up hope. As Easton lashes out, accusing Cannon of never wanting to be in Oregon, the secret Cannon has guarded for years rips from his throat. He reveals the brutal truth. His father, David, forced him to leave 7 years ago. David saw how much Easton wanted Cannon and feared Cannon would taint his perfect child. He offered Cannon a check and a jeep, commanding him to leave and never return. Cannon confesses he took the money because it felt like the only way to protect them both. He begs Easton not to push him away. For a brief moment, hope blossoms as Easton cups Cannon's neck. But the relief is short-lived. Easton admits that while leaving might be Cannon's regret, letting Cannon back into his heart is his own. He commands Cannon to leave for good this time. The rejection is total. Cannon is left standing on the deck with a mangled heart. He follows Easton's demand, packing his things and leaving his heart behind in Oregon. As he boards the plane with Anna, he is a ghost of himself, returning to a life that no longer fits. 1 month later, Easton remains trapped in a cycle of isolation. He reflects on how silence allows regrets to fester and finds himself haunted by the lies he used to push Cannon away. Learning to swim on his own has proven to be an exhausting battle against the feeling of drowning. The loss was compounded on the day Cannon left, when Easton discovered a wedding invitation Anna had left on his bed. For a month, he let it sit there, a mocking reminder of everything he lost. Only recently did he open it, realizing the wedding is scheduled for this very weekend. The knowledge that Cannon will be married in 24 hours feels like an anchor dragging him under. Easton finds that the ocean is now tainted by memories of Cannon. Every grain of sand reminds him of their last good day together. He realizes that Cannon was the oxygen he needed all along. As he wades toward the shore, his attention is caught by 2 men on the beach. He watches as they engage in a playful, affectionate photo shoot and share an unfiltered kiss. Seeing their pure happiness triggers a deep pang of longing. For the first time, Easton admits he wants that kind of love. The sight serves as a catalyst. He understands that with his mother, there was finality, but with Cannon, everything is still bleeding. He realizes that to move forward, he must confront the end of their story head-on. He decides he must go find the closure required to finally leave Cannon in the past. Easton arrives in Charleston on a Saturday morning, his body vibrating with a paralyzing mix of anxiety and nerves. By the time he reaches the church, he is on the verge of a physical collapse. He steps through the heavy oak doors just as the ceremony begins, finding Anna at the altar with Cannon. Panic seizes him, but he forces himself to stay. He has convinced himself that witnessing this union is the only way to reach acceptance. He believes that by watching the love of his life marry someone else, he can finally kill the hope that has been festering in his heart. Slipping into the back of the church, Easton is struck by the perfection of the floral arches and rose petals. He feels a nagging respect for Anna, seeing her as an innocent victim of the storm he and Cannon created in Oregon. But the moment he shifts his gaze to Cannon, the air is sucked from his lungs. Cannon looks handsome in a green-gray suit, Yet Easton can see the tension in his shoulders and the hollow slump of his posture. He realizes Cannon is performing a role. When Cannon's eyes scan the crowd and lock onto his, the connection is a visceral punch to the gut. Easton feels as though his skin has turned to glass, exposing his broken heart. He shakes his head, silently pleading with Cannon to stay at the altar and not ruin his life. The weight of his love becomes a force that is actively drowning him. Easton realizes he cannot stay to see the end. He flees, leaving before the ceremony can finish. 24 hours before the wedding, Cannon had forced himself to tell Anna that he slept with someone else. He refused to enter a marriage built on lies. Anna did not yell. She attributed his actions to grief and offered a hollow forgiveness. She suggested they move on and forget it ever happened. Her response unsettled Cannon more than anger would have, and he recognized his own cowardice in hiding the true depth of what he felt for Easton. Now, standing at the altar in the present, Cannon struggles to focus. His heart races as he recites his vows, his attention drifting to where Easton stood. He realizes that a life without Easton is not living, it is only surviving. When the preacher asks if anyone objects, everything inside Cannon stops. He locks his gaze on the back of the church, silently begging for a sign that what they had was worth fighting for. For a breathless moment, he imagines Easton stepping forward. But when he turns to look fully, the spot near the doors is empty. All that remains is one of the large double doors slowly swinging shut. Easton is gone. Cannon feels everything inside him break, leaving him standing there with nothing but the weight of what he has lost. 1 month later, the salty breeze floats into the surf shop in Oregon as Easton rubs wax onto his board. He reflects on the pride he feels in finally calling the business his own. Shortly after his disastrous trip to Charleston, Easton used his inheritance to buy the shop from Old Man John. He had prepared a comprehensive binder of plans, but John revealed he never intended to sell to anyone else. The transition was swift, and while gossip about his personal life lingers, Easton is relieved the focus has shifted to his success. Inside the shop, Easton engages in light-hearted banter with his young employee, Justin. Despite his efforts to stay grounded, Easton admits he only has eyes for one person. He goes to the water for therapy, choosing the specific spot where he and Cannon used to surf together. He reflects on a group text he received earlier involving a realtor and the sale of his parents' home. Cannon has not reached out to him directly since the wedding, and they have only spoken through professional intermediaries. Easton tells himself he is glad for the distance, yet he realizes he is still stubbornly tethered to his stepbrother. As he scans the beach, he spots a figure walking along the shoreline. At first, he assumes his mind is playing tricks, but the figure remains. It is undeniably Cannon, and he is staring out at the water. Easton paddles to shore, his heart pounding like waves hitting a levee. He is struck by how perfect Cannon looks, which fuels a bitter resentment. He demands to know why Cannon is in Oregon. Cannon simply says he came to find him. As the tension simmers, Easton notices new ink on Cannon's inner forearm. It is a tattoo of haystack rock with 3 birds flying beside it. Cannon explains the tattoo is a tribute to the parents they lost, including Easton's mother. He shares a story about his father's belief in the mystical powers of Cannon Beach and admits it took returning to his structured life in Charleston to realize the beach had claimed him too. Cannon declares that he left his heart on this beach with Easton. Confusion washes over Easton as he mentions the wedding he witnessed. He remembers the pain of hearing Cannon exchange vows. However, Cannon delivers a world-altering revelation. He didn't actually marry Anna. He couldn't go through with it because he was already in love with Easton. This confession acts as a restorative force, healing Easton's bruised heart. Cannon expresses his regret for the pain they've caused each other and his desire to fix it. Finally, Easton lets go of the secret he has carried for years, whispering that he has loved Cannon forever. They share a desperate, soul-searing kiss that tastes of home. In the aftermath, Easton realizes that Cannon is his anchor and his life preserver. Cannon reveals that he isn't just visiting, he is moving back to Oregon permanently. He has dismissed his old life and his job in Charleston, stating that his true life and family are here. The two of them stand together on the coast, recognizing that they are each other's true home. They have finally found a way to keep their heads above water, anchored to each other in the place where their story began. The clothes are half off before the garage door even closes. Cannon and Easton are completely naked by the time they reach the kitchen. Cannon feels a desperate urge to devour Easton, yet he wants to slow down and savor this fresh start. This time, they are no longer separated by a wedding or thousands of miles. As they move to the counter, Cannon reflects on the torture of standing at the altar for a life he didn't want. He feels relief for breaking things off with Anna, knowing she deserves someone who isn't in love with another man. Cannon retrieves the coconut oil from the cabinet, a gesture Easton remembers well. He leads Easton out to the patio, where he once fantasized about being together. As he preps Easton with his fingers, Cannon whispers a confession. He hasn't touched another person since they were last together. He promises that Easton was the last and will be the only one for him. Cannon enters Easton's body, and they both struggle for control. Cannon watches with desire as Easton moves in a slow rhythm. He trails his fingers over Easton's tattoos and kisses the sparrows on his collarbone. When Easton says "I love you," Cannon's pulse skyrockets. He takes over the rhythm, thrusting relentlessly until they both reach a thunderous climax. They remain on the patio chair afterward, spent and happy. Cannon admits he doesn't know how he ever thought he could live without him. The night ends with playful banter as Easton challenges him to a race to the shower. The next morning, Cannon wakes to kisses on his spine. They share a moment of intimacy, reflecting on a night of intense connection. Cannon realizes his heart has belonged to Easton for years. Over breakfast, Cannon notes with amusement that Easton is still bad at cooking eggs. Easton catches him up on his success with the surf shop. Eventually, the conversation turns to the wedding. Cannon explains that he confessed his infidelity to Anna as soon as he returned to Charleston. While she initially wanted to ignore it to save the marriage, seeing Easton at the back of the church changed everything. Cannon tells him that he felt Easton's presence instantly, and watching him walk away made a life with Anna impossible. He explains that the 2-month delay was to handle logistics and ensure he wasn't just filling a void. Cannon reveals he had a final, emotional call with Anna for closure. They were happy, but they weren't in love like this. He credits her for teaching him how to heal, allowing him to finally be ready for Easton. A week later, luck brings a swift offer on their parents' house. A young couple who fell in love at Cannon Beach as teenagers wants to buy it. This coincidence makes Cannon laugh, and Easton feels at peace with selling the house. However, clearing out the personal effects is an emotional task. On the third day of packing, Easton finds a hatch in the attic of Cannon's old bedroom. Inside are 10 boxes labeled with Cannon's name. This discovery freezes Cannon's blood, as he never put anything in storage before he was forced to leave years ago. They bring the boxes down to the kitchen. Cannon is stunned to find his high school trophies, yearbooks, and a signed baseball from a day with his father. Seeing these preserved memories prompts Easton to ask for the full story of why Cannon left. Cannon finally bursts the bubble and recounts the fight with his father and the month he spent living in his car. Easton apologizes for never knowing the truth and shares his own memory. He remembers that after Cannon left, Dave locked himself in that bedroom for 24 hours and erased every trace of Cannon from the house. While Cannon thought it was an act of hatred, Easton suggests it was Dave's only way of saying a painful goodbye. The revelation deepens when Cannon opens the only box without dust. Inside is a stack of 188 unsent letters addressed to every place Cannon had lived over the past 8 years. The sight of his father's handwriting makes Cannon feel sick with emotion. He decides he cannot let the mystery remain and opens the most recent letter, number 188. As tears stream down his face, Easton begins to read the letter aloud. The letter is a raw confession. Dave wrote about how holidays were hard because he knew how disappointed Cannon's mother would be. He admitted to debating every year whether to fly to Charleston, but he wanted to respect Cannon's wish for distance. Dave explained that he kept the letters to prove Cannon was never a second choice. He expressed deep regret for not being able to show his love properly. He described watching Cannon's life from a distance with pride, stating that while he didn't deserve to be called father anymore, it was his greatest hope. Hearing these words causes Cannon to break down in guttural sobs. He realizes he and his father were exactly alike, both bottling up their feelings. The letter concludes with a declaration of unconditional love. Cannon realizes that while it is too late to hear this in person, Easton's voice is the next best thing. Exhausted but determined to find closure, Cannon nods for Easton to keep reading. Easton pulls out another letter, then another. He gives life to the apologies and truths Cannon has needed for nearly a decade. Though the process shreds his soul, Cannon finally understands that he was loved all along. As Easton reads, the ghosts of the past finally begin to settle, and Cannon starts to truly heal. 18 months after the storm of their reconciliation, Easton stands on a private balcony in Hawaii, watching a golden sunset dip below the horizon. The winter breeze is warm and salty, but he no longer feels like he is drowning in it. 2 toned arms wrap around him from behind, and the weight of Cannon's presence immediately grounds him. As Easton feels the cool metal of Cannon's wedding band against his skin, a surge of possessive joy rushes through him. They have been married for a few months, and the reality of calling Cannon his husband, knowing the man is all his, still brings a massive smile to his face. Cannon has just stepped out of the shower, and despite being sore from days of constant surfing and intimacy, Easton is insatiable. They are on their 4th round of the day, but it is their honeymoon, and Easton believes they've earned every second of it. They share a deep, searing kiss on the balcony, a place that has always marked their most important shifts. Easton marvels at how their lives have finally fit together after years of being apart. He realizes that while he once tried to push Cannon away to save himself, this life of shared passion is exactly where he was always meant to be. They are no longer struggling to keep their heads above water. They have finally found the shore. Their journey to this peace required one final walk through the past. On the anniversary of their parents' deaths, Cannon and Easton had stood at the cemetery, the salt air of Oregon biting at their skin. There, Cannon finally finished reading the 188th letter from his father. In that vulnerable moment, as Easton's voice gave life to David's hidden apologies, the ghost of the father was finally laid to rest. It was the official end to a decade of regret, solidifying their roles as each other's permanent anchors. Now, in the heat of Hawaii, that bond is expressed in more playful, joyous ways. At a traditional luau, amidst the sound of drums and the scent of roasted pig, Cannon leans in to whisper a scandalous confession. He is currently wearing a glass plug to prep for their activities later that night, a secret he kept throughout the entire dinner to keep Easton interested. The revelation sends a jolt of fire through Easton. He is stunned by the mischief in Cannon's golden eyes and the effort his husband makes to ensure he is always wanted. Easton doesn't wait for the hula dancers or the end of the show. He leads Cannon away from the party toward their car, his mind focused entirely on the night ahead and the home they have built in each other. However, the origin of this all-consuming love was a moment of childhood denial. Nearly 20 years earlier, 9-year-old Cannon stood in front of a mirror, watching his father adjust his tie. He felt a sharp internal resistance to the idea of a new family, preferring the life where it was just him and his dad. His father promised that the new boy, Easton, would be his best friend, but Cannon remained skeptical, dismissing a 7-year-old as nothing more than a little kid who would be a nuisance. At a fancy restaurant, Cannon finally came face-to-face with the boy who would change his life. He saw a child with dark hair that flopped into his eyes that were a striking, deep gray, like storm clouds. Cannon thought the boy was pretty, a thought so foreign and awkward that he felt a sudden, fleeting impulse to reach out and push that hair out of Easton's face. Following his father's instructions to be polite, Cannon extended his hand. As Easton took his hand, Cannon felt a strange, electric tingle that he didn't have the tools to understand. When Easton finally smiled and spoke Cannon's name, Cannon experienced a fuzzy sensation in his heart and a weird little flip in his stomach. The intensity of these unfamiliar physical reactions terrified the young boy. Feeling unsettled by the way Easton made him feel, Cannon decided right then and there that he didn't like the boy after all. He was certain he never would.